Hi, welcome back to another episode of Coldstream Rod Shop. I'm Derek Fraser. In this week's video, I want to introduce a new project. I mentioned it in a previous episode, but this week's episode will be focused on working on this one. So what this is a 35 to 40 Ford passenger chassis or a 35 to 41 pickup chassis. In this particular case, the customer is going to be building a 35 Ford pickup. So he's supplied me with this frame. The frame was sandblasted and epoxy primed. He's put the Crossmember in, kind of bolted in and whatnot, and gave me some instructions about what he wants to do. There's quite a few little repairs I'm going to have to do to this particular chassis. It was abused at one point in time. So there's a couple sections here where I'm going to have to cut this out and put some metal in, grind off a few welds, and tack some of the cross members back together again. But in this project, he wants an 8-inch Ford rear end with parallel leaf springs. Now, we've done that before on one of the 34 chassis, so that's really nothing new, but it's just going to be on a different frame. And then he's asked me to put a Mustang 2 front end into it too. So again, kind of like some of the other projects, we've got a cross member from one kit and some arms from another. So there'll be a few challenges as far as trying to put them all together in the one kit. But essentially the Mustang 2 front suspension is relatively well known. The geometry is relatively well known, so it shouldn't be that difficult to do. One curveball he has with this that I haven't done yet on some of the other projects is he's got a front and a rear sway bar. So we're going to be doing that on this particular chassis. So anyways, follow along. The first step is going to be to make some repairs to the frame. I've got to put boxing plates in, and then we'll start probably putting the rear end in first. I've been making some progress on the 35 Ford pickup chassis, which again is basically the same chassis for a 35 to 40 passenger vehicle or a 35 to 41 pickup. But in this particular case, it's going to be for a 35 pickup. So that's what we're going to call it. The rear leaf springs, I had to take them back off. The chassis engineering kit was bolted on correctly. That's not the issue. But kind of as I may have described earlier, is that in the area where they bolt on, I had to put a boxing plate in there. I was going to pull it out and repair it, but what the owner wanted me to do was basically just take a 125 thick plate and then grind everything away. Don't cut the original piece out, but basically weld it in there so it supported where I guess where this mount bolted on. So I've got that done, got it all cleaned up. In this particular case, he does not want me to do the paint on it. Previous projects, anywhere where we did boxing plates or welded stuff up, I paint touched it up. But this particular chassis has epoxy primer on it, so his intention is, I guess, to do some disassembly and put some more epoxy primer on it and then paint the chassis. So we're going to carry on with this. So right now at this stage, I'm getting ready to put the rear end in. And much like the other rear end that we put in with the parallel leaf springs, there was supply brackets that the rear end sits on, but as you can see here, that hole is on the big side. So we got to weld that up. So what I've got some bushings that from another project, so I'm going to cut a piece of this off. And then I'm going to probably MIG or TIG weld that in place. I might give it a go with a new TIG welder. Doing not too bad with it. So we'll weld that in place, grind it off, and then basically bore out that hole the same size as this pin. So I think the pin is 1/2 inch. I'll put a vernier onto it and check it out. So gonna carry on with that. Then hopefully we're gonna get this 8-inch Ford rear end put in this chassis today. So here's my tip of the day, and it's gonna be painfully obvious to everybody else. Don't weld the hole up with stainless steel welding rods on your TIG welder, because when you go over to the drill press, you're going to have a nightmare trying to drill them out with just high-speed steel drills. So should have known better. That's all that I had here was stainless steel rods, but nevertheless, after sharpening the drill bits a few times and going slowly in the hole, we now have a 9/16 hole in the bottom of these brackets. So going to get ready here in a few minutes to put the rear end in. Got one over there sitting there right now. sitting on the leaf springs. Gonna put this one in. So what we'll do is we'll put the 8-inch forward rear end, that is, on the leaf springs. We'll lift it up, put it in the shackles, and then try and center. Well, actually, I will center between the brake drums to the frame, and then try and get our 3 degrees on the pinion. I'll tighten those bolts down some, and then obviously once we get the whole frame and the front suspension on too, we'll go back and check and adjust if necessary the pinion angle. So follow along, we're making some progress here. There's the 8-inch forward rear end mounted in the parallel leaf springs. I centered the axle itself between the backing plates in the frame. I used a drywall square there to get exactly the same distance at the same point between the frame and the backing plates. And then for now, these brackets here are not, those are not welded to the axle, because ultimately, once we get some weight and the engine in and everything else, we need the ability to adjust the pinion angle if necessary. If I've done a good job or made a good guess, we could be dead on. But at the moment, I've got it set up there with the angle finder and the pinion at 3 degrees right now. So next step, there's two other things we have to put on the rear end here. One is the shocks. So the lower shock mounts are on right now, but there's a chassis engineering kit that he bought. I think he bought all this stuff in the 1980s or the 1990s. The instructions are quite old, but looking through some old Rod Action and Street Rodder magazines from the 1980s, I found an ad. We'll send you, or we'll put a picture of that at the end of the video. I mean, it's straightforward stuff. In most cases, it's assembly work, but you're going to have to do a couple tweaks, as we found out with the dowel pin for the leaf springs. We had to modify that hole. So I'm going to carry on. I'm going to put the shocks on, but there's also, he has a front and rear sway bar kit. We don't see sway bars a whole lot on street rods and hot rods, but we do on a lot of modern cars. So there is a kit here from Chassis Engineering again. In amongst all that stuff there, you can see the sway bars on the floor. So we're going to put the rear sway bar on this as well. So follow along as we keep on working on the 35 Ford. So there's the shocks installed. This particular kit I said was from Chassis Engineering, but actually it's from Posey's. What it suggested was that the upper shock mounts be mounted from the inner frame rail here to the center, of the shock between 9 and 10 inches. So I made it 9.5. Angle looks a little steep for me, but these are shock absorbers, not coilover shocks, so it's a little bit different. If we were using coilover shocks, I probably would use a much more robust upper shock mount. But in this case, this is just a shock absorber and not bearing, the whole weight of the car onto it like a coilover spring. So there it is. Let's see if we can get the picture from the bottom. There's a picture of the bottom with the shocks installed. So next up we are going to, or I am going to put the sway bar in the back. I'm not sure if that's a Chassis Engineering or a Posey one, but when you open up the instructions, you get going with it, I'll tell you which one it is. welded the rear sway bar mounts in. The sway bar was from Speedway, so we've got a combination of Posies, Chassis Engineering, and Speedway parts. The upper brackets, I don't think they were for this specific kit, but I located it in the right location, had one bolt hole into it, and then just basically welded it to the Chassis Engineering rear leaf spring hangers from both sides. Sorry it took me so long to put those tires on because the studs, they were rusty. Axles must have been reconditioned. I know they got new bearings onto them, but all the threads on the to put the tires on, I had to basically chase all the threads to get those on. Hopefully the camera lady will speed up the time lapse on that. So that's the rear end in, parallel leaf springs. We've got the shocks in and a sway bar in. Sorry about that. Next, I am going to work on finishing off the center cross member. There's a lower portion that has to go on, and then there's a little repair I got to make on that one cross member there. And then I'll probably finish this video up before I go on to the front. So follow along, we're not done yet. Not done this week. So before I put the rest of the chassis engineering center cross member in, one of the things the customer asked me to do was repair some of these cross braces. He had taken them all out, pieced this frame together from a couple other frames. So I made a repair here and here. And as you can see, the other side is in a little bit more trouble, I guess, so to speak. So I am going, hopefully we can focus that, I'm sorry. I'll try and straighten that out. Get the right angle onto it and weld her back together and get it back in here. Okay, so I got the camera lady back, so we're going to get some better video of what we're doing here. I got the second piece of the cross member fixed up. I had to basically flatten the one area and rebend the side. As I pulled it out there, you should have seen me pointing out to how messed up it was. So anyway, it's all straight now, or relatively straight. Had to make a couple spacers right here to go underneath this bracket from Chassis Engineering. I also put the bottom piece in, which is going to turn out to be a transmission mount. They've got it marked here for Turbo 350 transmission. I'm not sure what's going in here. I was talking to the owner earlier today. He's given me two options of what he wants to put in this frame. It's either going to be a flathead, an automatic transmission, or it's going to be an early DeSoto Hemi, an automatic transmission. I'm really hoping that it's going to be an early DeSoto Hemi. He has a couple of them rebuilt, so it's anyway, we'll see. He's going to surprise me. Next up on this frame, I have to make this repair here on part of the X member. Then we're going to work forward. We're going to box the front of the frame and start putting the Mustang 2 front end on. Right now I am sitting perfectly level with the front of the frame, and if I put that level on the back of the frame, I am perfectly level. So we've got a nice square frame here. Even with messing around with the center cross member, tightening, loosening, taking the pieces out, we're still square. So anyway, hopefully that'll continue as I put everything through, but we'll keep checking it. But that's it for this episode. We got the back half of the 35 Ford chassis done. It's going to be a 35 Ford pickup is what this project is ultimately going to be. Talking to the owner, not sure how we're going to go with it, much like the other chassis. Anyway, follow along. But that's it for this week's video. Please like, share, tag, and subscribe. Send me your comments, and I hope to see you next week. Everybody take care and have a great week.